Thank you so much for attending my presentation about a topic that I've wanted to make a video about for a while now, the unknown forms ranked by how letter-like they are, and quickly I have to clarify what I mean. I'm not ranking these forms based on how good of Pokemon they are. I'm ranking them based on how much they look like their intended letter. There might be a small part of an unknown form that makes it look cuter or whatever, and while that's good design, it will get penalized in this context. Also, after recording this, I went back to draw some little diagrams or examples of what I'm talking about on screen so it's a little easier to understand what's going on. Say hi to future me for me. Plus, this is a collaboration with Pokedoku. Make sure to play my creator puzzle today and check out their game if you haven't already. It's very fun. And let's just say today's featured Pokemon has something to do with it. With all that being said, let's talk about by far the worst unknown form, Unown G. If you didn't know that Unown G was a G before I told you, I wouldn't blame you. It looks more like a Q or an R or maybe even a P, but G? Where does this come from? A normal lowercase g has a circle at the top and then a hook at the bottom. Pretty simple. Unown G's circle isn't a circle. It's this weird sharp shape that doesn't adequately convey a G. It looks so odd, which is made even worse by the fact that there's a regular circle right below it, being Unown's eye. Why they didn't just make that the top of the G is beyond me. The hook is also really rough. It cuts back in a confusing way that the actual letter doesn't ever really do. Even the little double back that you can do on an uppercase G isn't comparable. The hook isn't really a hook at all anymore. This combined with the already messy top half makes it basically unrecognizable. If this design were to be improved, I'd honestly just use the eye as the circle like I said before and add a regular lowercase g hook onto the bottom. I'm really not sure why they didn't just do that. As we'll see later, they weren't opposed to designs that look just like a letter with no alterations, but whatever. From here, things actually get a lot better. These next two are in theory fine designs, but have a few glaring problems that make them tough to decipher. Unown P's big issue is that the line is slanted instead of straight, which makes it look way more like an uppercase R than it was probably intended. When you see a circle with a diagonal line coming out of it, like Unown P, at least personally, I don't think it's a P. I've never seen a P with something like that before. But you know what I have seen? An uppercase R. Changing the angle of this line by about 25 degrees would fix this issue entirely. Unown Q is an interesting idea, but ultimately falls flat. It's a weird mix of the uppercase and lowercase, which leads to it looking like neither. The line is too long for it to look like an actual uppercase Q, and the little nub at the end of it, while surely meant to represent the hook in the lowercase q, doesn't work. The diagonal line problem strikes again. If this came off the side, it might be fine, but that's a world we don't live in. This Unown Q design looks way more like a key than the actual letter right now. I see it and I think I could probably put it in a door and unlock it. Not the worst design, but definitely not the best either. Getting into our next tier, Unown C is emblematic of a problem that we've seen a bit of today. One small change that makes it very difficult to tell what's going on. This one is hurt because of the positioning of the opening. Both uppercase and lowercase c have its opening dead on the right, no diagonals at all, but Unown departs from this, being pretty far down to the right. This makes it look more like an O to me. I always need to take a second whenever I see Unown C to make sure I know which one it is. Shifting the opening to where it normally is would make the design work much better. Unown R has the very funny problem of looking a lot like a P. While it does have that diagonal line that uppercase R has, it doesn't extend very far down. This makes it look more like the little nubs that you see in a lot of other Unown forms and thus blends into the background a bit. I honestly think that if you switched Unown P and Unown R, it might almost make more sense, but that could be a bit radical. Even so, adopting some elements of Unown P into Unown R could make it more clear, like adding that diagonal line, which would immediately make it look really good. Unown B, U, V, and exclamation point are all kinda close to their letter, but do have a few problems that give me pause, especially in relation to other letters. Unown B is very weird and is heavily carried by the fact that no other letter even looks remotely like it. Does it look like a B? Not too much, it doesn't have a line on the back of it, and the little parts poking off are a bit distracting, but it still works out because of how unique the letter B is. But if there were number unknowns, it would look like an 8. It still goes down here though, despite how obvious it is. Unown U and exclamation point actually share the opposite problem. They look a lot like other letters, in their case W and I respectively. In a vacuum, it might be easier to figure out what they were, but since they share so many traits with other parts of the alphabet, you do have some struggles. I could move both of these up and feel okay about it, but considering how much trouble they can be to identify sometimes, I'll keep them down here. Unown V is a weird one for me, because while I think it really isn't that much like a V on paper, I never find myself struggling to figure it out. It both looks just like a V and not at all like a V at the same time, so I'm putting it here, although I could consider moving it down a tier or two. This next tier is filled with forms that are easy to identify and absolutely do look like their target letter, but have a couple of weird traits that hold them back. Unknown K is great, but the two lines coming out of the I are both very short, even for the lowercase. It's definitely a K, but one I'd see on something 15 pages into a free fonts website. Unknown M is the same. 100% that is an M, but the curved lines, compression, and dots above it do make it a bit inaccurate. Unknown Z is the hardest one to figure out on this page for me, which is because you don't really see it double back. When looking for a Z, I'm always super concerned with noticing the line in the middle, as that distinguishes it from an S, but you don't get that. The I does make it easier to figure out, it does go in that direction, but the change isn't exactly obvious the first time you see it. This is where it gets really quick, as the last two tiers are forms that are very obviously their letter. First are ones where there's maybe one slight difference that keeps it from the highest tier, but are super simple to figure out. Being brief as to not bore you, unknown A's middle connector is curved, unknown D doesn't fully connect, unknown F and Y have some little feet at the bottom, plus F's highest horizontal line is oddly shaped, unknown H's lines are curved instead of straight, unknown J and L branch off in weird ways near the top, unknown S looks a bit slanted despite its obvious shape, and unknown W doesn't have any sharp angles, instead having its lines all branch out from the same starting point. And then the top tier, unknowns E, I, N, O, T, X, and question mark are all basically just the letter. Plus, I'm adding unknown exclamation point here too because it also looks just like its symbol but gets kind of hoed by unknown I. The only two here I might ever dock are unknown E and unknown O, which both have an extra line, but it's so insignificant I decided to let it slip. And that's the list. There's a few placements I'm willing to move on, but for the most part, I'm pretty confident I nailed it. Unown is one of my favorite Pokemon, and even though I can't really make an interesting video on it from the competitive side, there's still a lot of fun in there. Also, Champions content is coming soon, I swear. This has just been in the works for a while now, and I've wanted to gather my thoughts before I make anything. But do expect a video about a certain Rotund Mega Evolution later this week. Make sure to play the Pokedoku today, and thank you so much for watching.